Hi everyone, and welcome to Sweet Pea Seeds Inspirations. My name is Sydney, and today we are going to be working on the Garnet Glow Knitted Cowl, which is inspired by the January's Birthstone Garnet. And real quick before we actually move into materials and things that you need to know about this cowl, I just want to talk briefly about garnet and the healing properties and why some people do wear garnet that might not be their birthstone. So garnet helps ground and protect the user while boosting self-confidence and courage, but it also is good for passion and serenity. Now I'm going to keep it there, very minimum, but if you would like to know a little bit more about the history, the healing properties, and also how you can incorporate that into your projects and how to wear it and all that good stuff, then you can go catch that over on my blog, which will be down in the description box. Materials that you are going to need for today's project. Let's go ahead and go over the choice of yarn. So if you are really wanting to embrace that garnet gemstone look for the month of January, you are going to need a deeper red color, whether that is actually garnet itself, a burgundy, maybe a red wine, something in that nature. You will need a dark color to really embrace the coloration of the garnet gemstone. So today I am using Premier Basic DK in the color burgundy. And this is a light 3-weight yarn. It is 100% acrylic, and there is 306 yards here. I want to say you're going to need a little bit less than 200 yards. This is one full skein, so there is still quite a bit left here, but that's also going to depend on how big or long you want, or not necessarily big, but how long you want your cowl. You're going to also need some knitting needles, which need to be a 5mm, whether those are circular or DPNs. Today I am going to be using DPNs, where this is a smaller project, along with a cable needle, because this is going to come in handy for our 3rd row repeat. A tapestry or darning needle to sew the 2 ends together, but also weave in any loose ends. And then of course a pair of scissors. So this is going to be an 8-row repeat. We'll continue the 8-row repeats throughout this cowl, and I will actually go over how to do a right leaning cable and a left leaning cable throughout this tutorial. But other than that, all you really need to know how to do is how to knit and how to purl. So today's project is fairly simple, other than those cables, which it's just twisting the stitches around a little bit for 1 row, which is that 3rd row repeat. So if you are ready, I am. If you do have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to email me. My email will be down in the description box, and I will try to help you out as best as I possibly can. But let's go ahead and grab our yarn, grab our needles, and get started. We're going to first start off by casting on a total of 42 stitches, but we are going to section them out. So we're going to first cast on 11, and I am using the long tail cast on. So when you have 11 stitches, we're going to go ahead and place a stitch marker that is going to indicate one section that is going to be for our cabling, one of our side cablings. And then the next section is going to be the middle where there's a ridge going on, and we're going to cast on 20. You'll place your stitch marker after those 20, and then we're going to cast on another 11. Again, you should have 3 sections, 11, 20, and 11. That's going to equal up a total of 42 stitches. So now we will start working on the 8-row repeat. We're going to jump right into it. So the first repeat unit, we're going to start off with a knit or purl of 2. So purl 2. And we will be working on the right side. And then we're going to knit 6. We're going to purl 2. And then knit 1. You should now be at your stitch marker. So we're going to slide our stitch marker over. And now we're going to purl 20. And that should lead you right to the next stitch marker. So you're going to slide that stitch marker over. We're going to knit 1, purl 2, knit 6, and purl those last 2 stitches. So that was the first repeating row. For the second, we're going to go ahead and turn our work. We'll be working on the back side now. And And we're going to start off with a knit of 2. Purl 6. Knit 2. Purl 1. And you should be at your first stitch marker. So we're going to slide that stitch marker over. And now we're going to knit 20. Leading you to the next stitch marker. We're going to slide that stitch marker over. We're going to purl 1. We're going to knit 2. Purl 6. And knit those last 2 stitches. That was the second repeating row. For the third repeating row, I want to break down this row a little bit because we are going to be working with the cable needle and actually create our cables. So if you've never worked with cables before, we are going to do something that's called a 6-stitch right cable, and then also a 6-stitch left cable in the third repeating row. And what that means is it depends on whether the cable will be leaning to the right or if it's going to be leaning to the left. And the difference between the two is the placement of the stitches that we are going to place on our cable needle, whether it's going to be in the back of our work or the front of our work. So with the right cable needle, we will slip 3 stitches onto our needle, and we're going to place that to the back. With the left, we are going to place 3 stitches onto our cable needle, and then we will pull that cable needle to the front. So I'm going to break that down with you real quick. So I won't go over right now the stitches for the third repeating row. I just want to kind of have you watch me do the cables, and then we'll go back together and actually do row number 3 together. So for row number 3, I am going to start off with a purl 2. Now this is not part of the cable just yet. So this cable is consisted of 6 stitches. So what we're going to do is we are going to slip purlwise 3 stitches onto our cable needle. Now, if you don't have a cable needle, you can use another knitting needle or maybe a crochet hook or a tapestry needle, something where you can slip those stitches onto. And so after I have slipped those 3 stitches, I'm going to actually place that cable needle to the back of my work. And this is the right leaning cable. And then once I have gotten those 3 stitches slipped purlwise, I'm going to knit the next 3 stitches. So once I have knitted those 3 stitches, I'm going to take the stitches that are on the cable needle and I'm going to knit those. Sometimes when you are starting with cables, they can be a little finicky. You just got to get your hands in them. So that is a right leaning cable. As you can see, that twist does start to go to the right. And now we will work a left leaning cable. So now for a left leaning cable, we're going to slip 3 stitches to our knitting needle. And with the left leaning cable, we're going to keep that in the front. So you can just let that dangle in the front. And then we are going to knit the next 3 stitches. Once you have knitted those 3 stitches, we're going to go back to the stitches that are on that cable needle, and we are going to knit those stitches. So there is the difference between a right and a left leaning cable. Now let's work row number 3 together. For the 3rd repeating row, we're going to start off with a purl of 2. So purl the first 2 stitches. And you should be on the right side of your work. And now we're gonna do a right leaning cable. So one way that you can remember exactly if you're doing a right leaning or a left leaning is when you are working on the right side of your work, the right leaning cable is always going to be on the right side and the left leaning is always going to be on the left side. So let's do a right leaning cable by slipping 3 stitches purlwise onto our cable needle. And then we are going to place that cable needle to the back of our work. And then we are going to knit the next 3 stitches. And then we are going to take the stitches that are on that cable needle and we are going to knit those stitches. So there is our 6-stitch right leaning cable. And then we are going to purl 2, which should leave us to the stitch right before our stitch marker. And we are going to knit 22 stitches. And that will lead you to the stitch right after that next stitch marker. So stitch right after that next stitch marker. I'm going to knit that stitch, which is a part of that 22 stitch count. And then I'm going to purl the next 2 stitches. And then now we're going to do a left leaning cable. So let's go ahead and grab our cable needle and slip purlwise 3 stitches. And we're going to let that dangle in the front of our work. Knit 3. Go back to those 3 stitches that we slipped on our cable needle, and we're going to knit this straight off of that needle. And then we are going to purl the last 2 stitches. So that is our 3rd repeating row. For our 4th, we're going to go ahead and turn our work to now we are on the back side of our work. We'll start off with a knit of 2. We're going to purl 6. We'll knit 2, and then we're going to purl 22. So we are at the stitch right before our stitch marker. We're going to purl all the way until the stitch marker after, or yeah, the stitch after the next stitch marker. So you'll have a total of 22 purls. So the stitch right after that stitch marker, go ahead and purl that stitch. Again, that is part of the 22 stitches. We're going to knit the next 2. Purl 6. And knit the last 2 stitches. So that was the 4th repeating row. For rows 5 and 6, we are going to repeat rows 1 and 2. So you should be on the right side of your work. We're going to start off with a purl of 2. We'll knit 6. purl 2, knit 1, slide that stitch marker over to your right hand needle, and then we're going to purl 20. And that should leave you to the next stitch marker. We're going to slide that stitch marker over. We'll start off with a knit of 1, purl 2, knit 6, and then purl 2. So that was the 5th repeating row. Again, that was just a repeat of row 1. Row 6 is going to be a repeat of row 2. So we're going to start off with a knit of 2, and you should be on the wrong side of your work. Purl 6, knit 2, purl 1, slide your stitch marker over, and then knit 20. And that will lead you to the next stitch marker. So slide that stitch marker over. We're going to purl 1, knit 2, purl 6, and then knit 2. So that was the 6th repeating row. For the 7th, you're going to go ahead and turn your work, and you should be on the right side of your work. We'll start off with a purl of 2, knit 6, purl 2, and knit 22. So you should be to the stitch right before that stitch marker. So we're going to knit 22. and that will lead you to the stitch right behind that stitch marker. We're gonna purl 2, knit 6, and then purl the last 2 stitches. So that was the 7th repeating row. For the 8th, let's go ahead and turn our work to now we are on the wrong side of our work. This is going to be the last repeating row before we start repeating all 8 rows again. So we are going to start off with a knit of 2, purl 6, knit 2, and now we're going to purl 22. So stitch right before the stitch marker, purl that stitch, and then purl the 20, and then that 1 right after the next stitch marker, again giving you a total of 22 stitches. Once you have purled those 22 stitches, we're going to knit 2, purl 6, and then knit 2. You will go ahead and continue working those 8 row repeats until you have gotten your desired length and or between 21 to 22 inches. And once you have made it to that point, we are going to do a knit bind off, which I have already kind of started here. So you'll knit your first stitch, you'll knit your second stitch, and then your first stitch, we're going to go ahead and pass that over top of the second. So again, knit the next stitch, take that front stitch and pass it over top of that second. Knit the next stitch, pass over that front stitch over top of the stitch we just knitted. And we'll go ahead and continue that all the way through. So one more time, knit the next stitch, pass that front stitch over top of the stitch we just knitted. So go ahead and continue binding off. Now we're going to connect the 2 pieces together. So you're going to go ahead and flip your cowl on the inside out, so where the cables are on the inside. And we're going to just sew the 2 ends together. So I have already got my yarn threaded onto my needle, and we're just going to weave back and forth between those stitches. You can do this however you would like. I just like to go back and forth between those 2 stitches. all you have left to do is weave any loose ends. And there is our Garnet Glow Knitted Cowl. I hope you enjoyed today's project just as much as I have. I really enjoyed getting back into learning more about crystals, and also as I'm learning, I'm also teaching. So if you would like to learn a little bit more about the garnet gemstone, please go give my blog a follow and read a little bit more about the garnet gemstone. But I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. If you do have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can always feel free to email me, which my email will be down in the description box. But please enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video.